Right, hello. My name is George English. I'm the Director of Research through People. And today we're going to be talking to Mandy Fox and Gillian Boag about their ancestry, which starts in Ireland and goes to Scotland with some very interesting stops on the way. Mandy, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, George. Thanks so much for having us on this morning. So, yeah, my name's Andy Fox. I'm currently living in County Waterford, but I am Scottish and I am the daughter of Margaret Louisa Nixon.
Ah, and Gillian.
Hello, so I'm Gillian Boag and I was born in Scotland and currently living in Glams, which is in Angus. And I am the daughter of George Nixon.
That's good. And you recognize these people in the photo here?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Granny and Grandpa, yeah.
Yeah, grandparents and whatever. That's good, yes. And so we got two particular surnames, but obviously there are others and as we go into this. So what do you know about your ancestors before this recent thing?
Personally, I don't know about you, Mandy, but I didn't know an awful lot really. I know some of the stories that Granny Nixon shared about how she met Grandad. But other than that, I didn't know an awful lot.
I would have heard a lot of the stories growing up. It was my favorite thing to hear the stories of the family tree and the what went on in the old days. So I used to love the stories, and I used to retell a lot of the stories. So it's very interesting to do this for proper because obviously, as families tell stories through the generations, we weave in, I suppose, our own perceptions and our own context, and some facts may get a little bit skewed or lost, but at the same time, I think for a lot of the family, that is their heritage, the stories rather than the facts sometimes.
Hmm.
So it's very interesting to compare what the actual facts are and what we felt the facts were. But either way, it's just really interesting to get to know them.
Mhm. Yes, well put. That's so often the case, and our parents and grandparents pass down some things. How much depends on a lot of factors. Okay. What I've done, I've prepared one or two slides which may help us, but really you talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Okay.
Let me see if I can. I've lost the. Oh, there we go. All right. Yeah. So as I say, we started in Ireland. Obviously, O'Hara is a very Irish name, and here we've got back to the 18th century, and Mayo is in the north west of Ireland. Have either of you been there?
Nope.
No. You have to go, won't you?
Mhm.
So what's interesting, so there's Michael O'Hara and Mary, and they have their son Peter over there. And in fact, they came across to Scotland in the 1840s. Um, and so we see Peters and Winridge born in Ireland, but come across, and there's James born in Lanarkshire. And in fact, they very much came to Lanarkshire, Wishaw, Carluke, and so on. Again, do you know that area?
Mhm.
Yeah, a little bit.
And is that because of this ancestry or just over the years you've been there?
No,
No.
that side of our family was completely in the dark to us until you did your research. So we didn't know we had any generations there.
Yeah, and it come very much. The Industrial Revolution plays a big part in the last
Mhm.
couple of hundred years, and the sort of things people do, and very much that area of Lanarkshire was coal, steel, various things. Made a lot of progress in the Industrial Revolution, and what our ancestors did is so interesting. So there's Michael.
Mhm.
So textiles was a very key industry. So Ireland quite known for weaving, as Scotland as well. So a linen weaver, and then his son Peter does something very different. Well, coal mining, but such a crucial part of feeding the Industrial Revolution, the factories and so on and so forth. So I quite often get people with perhaps five generations of ancestors who went down the mines. And so here Peter goes down the mines in Ireland, and then his son does the same over here.
Mhm.
Again, did you know anything about that?
No.
Yeah. You're like a lot of people. And it might go far for me to get into the detail of that, but that's quite something. And you go literally hundreds, if not thousands of feet down under the ground.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Over the years, it's got better, but it was not a safe thing to do a long
Hmm.
time ago. And there's some horrific stories of some of the things. So Ireland is very interesting as a country and the things that have happened over the century. And quite interesting, going back to the Reformation you have heard of in the 1500s, virtually the whole of Europe was Catholic. And then England and Scotland went Protestant, but Ireland stayed Catholic. And that's been a factor ever since in relation to, as you know, Northern Ireland was much more Protestant. That's eventually become a separate country. And then there are these four provinces. And here's Ballina in County Mayo, where your ancestors came from. And you've been to Ireland, though, have you?
I have, yeah, to visit Mandy.
Well, yeah,
And
Andy Mayo.
but I've not been to that part of Ireland at all.
And of course, Waterford's right down the south, isn't it, Mandy? But have you
Hmm.
been up to
Yeah,
County Mayo?
we're a good distance from Mayo, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lovely countryside, isn't there? And I enjoy the music and the drinking. Have you been to Temple Bar in Dublin?
Yes, yes. You go once, you won't be able to afford to go back again. I think it's 15 euros a pint at the moment. So
Is that right? Wow, gosh.
yeah.
That's some great singing anyway. Good stuff. It's interesting that and, a lot of people in the west of Scotland have Irish ancestry,
Mm.
particularly because of the Great Famine, which you may well know about. But in the mid 1800s, they literally, a lot of people, their only foodstuff was the potato, and there was potato blight for 6 years. So
Mhm.
1 million people died. 1 million emigrated. A lot came to the west of Scotland, went to America, and so on and so forth. And it looks as though your ancestors came before then. The O'Hara's the 1840s. I don't know if it's connected or not. But anyway, they ended up leaving up their homeland and coming across to Scotland. So there are no tales in the family about Ireland then.
No, we didn't know anything about, other than the fact that we knew there was an Albert O'Hara, who was our grandfather's father, and that his family were from Ireland. That's the only thing we knew.
So the name O'Hara obviously suggests Ireland, doesn't it? So what sort of
Hmm.
thing have you got out of this so far?
Well, this is even knowing that that they had actually been in Scotland since 1840 is a big thing, because I had actually believed that Albert O'Hara had been born and raised in Mayo and then come across to Scotland and met Susan then. So that's completely new to me.
Yeah, and all of it's new to me. So
Yeah.
it's
Well,
just
that's good.
fascinating to hear, to learn so much and to learn about what was going on in the world around them that maybe led to them making the decisions that they did. And of course, all those decisions along the way is what led to us. So that's why I find fascinating.
Yeah. Is it? Yeah. I find generally about age 50 is probably where people before 50, not many people are very interested. As we get to that sort of age and it becomes more interesting. And exactly as you say, our ancestors lived through history. Things happened that affected their lives. Obviously, the Great Famine,
Mm,
the big thing, isn't it? And migration, I find fascinating. Why does someone leave
mm,
their homeland
mm-hmm.
somewhere else? And we talk about push and pull. Sometimes it's the attraction of where they go to. Interesting when America, a lot of people went to the Brave New World and that sort of thing. Sometimes they're driven out by famine, war, and other things, and so on. And anyway, they come across to Glasgow, various family members. Most went out to the Wishaw and so on area, which is is to the east of Glasgow. This John O'Hara ended up the Gorbals of Glasgow was very much the poor part of Glasgow, and life in the 19th century was pretty tough for a lot of.
Mm.
And I think this is quite a graphic photo of, I'm sure you've known of the Gorbals. I think most people have heard of the Gorbals in terms of Glasgow and the slums that were there. And people did jobs which were associated either with what was going on there, like coal and textiles, or in this case, clearly the Glasgow, the River Clyde. So John O'Hara's dealing in fish, and then he works actually in the harbour, whereas most of your ancestors went out to. And coal was very key in Scotland, and Scotland played a very big part in the Industrial Revolution, which sort of got really going in the 18th century and then much more in the 19th century. And so here we are, the area, Glasgow, at the Shotts, Motherwell, Wishaw, the sort of area your ancestors were in, but you can see where mines were, and down in Ayrshire, where I live, a lot of that going on. And so Peter went down the mines in Ireland, and his son did as well. And I just put a map in of here's Wishaw on the west side, Overtown, features of your ancestors. Carluke is down here, but very much this sort of area, Motherwell, Hamilton, a lot of participation in the Industrial Revolution. So what do you know about these sort of places?
Not an awful lot, really. Just interestingly, one of my mum's best friends, used to live in Hamilton and Wishaw, so we used to go down and visit her and be around that area quite a lot. But other than that, that's all I really
But
know.
without knowing that you're
Which blows my mind. And had some friends from Carluke as well, so yeah, it's just funny how things work.
Have you managed in the last couple of months or so to actually go to this area and see houses where your ancestors live?
No.
Not yet. No. I recommend what I try and do is we've got addresses there. Of course, some of the houses are away, but I find it quite moving when you actually see a house where. So, how long have you been down in Ireland yourself, Mandy?
I've been in Ireland since 2002. I moved across.
Right. What took you there?
A husband.
So
He came over to Scotland for university. We met
he's
at
Irish.
university, and then we went back to Ireland together eventually. Yeah.
Well, there again, it's a migration issue, isn't it? But the other direction.
Love instead of coal this time.
Yeah. And you can see in the report, what we do, we take the places, particularly the number of documents are crucial, clearly the birth, marriage and death records. And the censuses are very interesting because you'll see there the address where they actually lived in Overtown or what have you. And in terms of researching, I'm trying to make sure I get good evidence, and you see the mother, father and the children together, and that clearly helps. And it says where they're living, it says where they were born, how old, and what sort of work they did as well. So I've got some old photos. I put this one of Wishaw in there. And clearly the occupation and employment in an area determines how that place grows. Wealth comes in or not. It's slightly sad in a way. Now you see places which were very prosperous when there was a lot of employment around, and those places, some of the Industrial Revolution places, coal and iron, have gone down from there. Funny enough, you don't follow football, do you?
No, sorry.
I come from Kent, the other end of the country originally, but I supported Motherwell. Okay. And I think it was because they were top of the league when I first started getting interested about age 7 or something. So I learned the area a little bit, but then I came up here and learned a bit more about it. And Carluke again, a nice sort of blend there. The River Clyde clearly plays a part. But it's interesting, isn't it, thinking about our ancestors living in these sort of places and working down the mines and so on. But and of course, there's various things go on with the family. The children go to school. It's a nice school. What do we do in the holidays and so on and so forth? You said you've got friends in Carluke, is that right?
Not now, but when we were at university, knew people that came from Carluke. In fact, lived with somebody that was from Carluke, so it's just bonkers. But I don't know the area really at all.
Jacob's Ladder?
No.
So where were you at university?
I was at Strathclyde University. It took me a minute to remember that because it's such a long time ago now. So Strathclyde University in Glasgow.
And studying what?
Speech and language therapy.
Oh, right, interesting.
Yep.
And isn't it because Glasgow and Strathclyde? Strathclyde had more of a technical emphasis, didn't it? That language is clearly not connected with that.
No.
In fact, I did my genealogy qualification at Strathclyde, which was quite interesting.
Did you?
Hmm.
Ah,
Yeah, no, it's got quite a reputation for that. And Mandy,
nice.
what about yourself?
I would have studied at Paisley University, it was called at the time, and I studied behavioral sciences.
Right. Aha. So probably a bit like myself then, but
Yeah.
psychology and things and people.
Psychology, sociology, politics, and economics, but I majored then in psychology, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because one intriguing thing is, did we do that because of anything our ancestors did? Have we inherited things being passed on? And one of the intriguing things is if you talk about coal mining and so on. I had someone who had a very illustrious career, and it doesn't matter what, and he had 5 generations of coal miners, father, grandfather. And you thought, if those people had had opportunities, what would have happened?
Mm,
Opportunities
mm,
for women in the past, of course, were very limited.
mm,
And ultimately, we have inherited from our ancestors certain things, hopefully good things that come in.
mm, mm.
So you, Mandy, sorry, Gillian, you've got, is it Laura, your sister?
Yes, Laura. Hmm.
How many, are there 2 or 3 of you that, your brothers,
Just the two of us. Yeah, yeah,
and did
yeah.
she go to university then?
Oh, so she went to university in Dundee. Don't ask. Was it Abertay she
Right.
went to? Oh, she'll kill me because that's probably wrong.
Right.
But yeah, she stayed in Dundee and I think she did marketing.
Yeah.
And now she works in the NHS.
All right. Interesting.
Yeah.
And Mandy?
I have one older brother, Gareth. He's 2 years older than me. And he, goodness me, he got some really fancy degree in Manchester, doing something with IT, and he's got a really, really big fancy job doing something with that kind of stuff. I don't really know what he does, but it's really, really clever and really, really big.
Yeah. No, it's really good. Again, school education only became compulsory in about 1870.
Mm.
So you sometimes get these old marriage things where people sign with an X, because they
Mhm.
haven't had the education, and we get so much more opportunity now. And there's pros and cons with that. But intriguingly, I joke actually, because I come from Kent down south, and I came to university. It was St Andrews, but I was in Dundee, so I found it hard to understand when the locals were talking.
You would, yeah.
And I say,
The-
accents and all the rest of it, all these sort of things
Mhm.
go on with us and with our ancestors. So anyway, that's the O'Hara side. So briefly again, put up the Nixon thing. So again, we have William is born in Ireland, and then he comes across, and they go down to Girvan on the coast in Ayrshire. Again, have you been there?
We had an Auntie Tootie Auntie Tootie and Louise lived in Girvan for many years. So sometimes we go visit them.
Ah,
That is, I think, Granny Nixon's cousins or nieces. Oh,
all right. What's the name?
um, Tootie and Louise. I think it was
All right.
Granny's nieces.
Right. Yeah. The Tucci is not what they write on the certificate.
No, I don't know what the real name is, but it was Tootie and Louise, and yeah, they both had disabilities, so they were looked after by their mum, which would have been Granny's sister, until she passed, and then now they were looked after in a care service.
Uh-huh.
So they were living in Girvan their whole lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So William Nixon, he's a weaver, so again textiles, but then they actually ran a pub in Girvan, the
Mm.
Mason's Arms, which is unfortunately is away now. But I deliberately put in his date of death because so he dies, but so his wife Mary Ann, I said, took on the running of the pub, and you can see in the report spirit dealer. That's quite interesting because it's pubs, most of them actually are still there. It's a shame that it's not, but we know exactly where in Girvan it was. And of course, Girvan's on the coast, so very much affected by things that seeded. But there's William Nixon just becomes a tradesman of some sort. And eventually there's Susan, and Susan was adopted. Again, did you know that when you no,
No, I didn't. I don't think I did anyway.
yeah. No,
Well,
and there's always
we what
aspects.
we
Right, on you
what
go.
our belief was, what our grandmother was led to believe, um, was that Susan wasn't adopted. We didn't know that information. We thought that those were her real parents. That's what we thought.
It's interesting well, interesting adoption that the clearly as parents, what happens? Can you have children or can't you? You know, you can't. You try and adopt, and they were actually living up in the Lanarkshire area. So it's interesting they adopted in Castle Douglas down in the borders. Now, from about 1930, there are good adoption records, but I've had a look and I've tried quite hard to find connection because, of course, that the bloodline is different, isn't it? If someone's brought in as
Mm.
adopted, and exactly why and what. Really, I haven't found out very much. Or sometimes you find, the church was involved. You can find records. Sometimes the family know a lot about it, but in this case, we don't. Or we know that she was born there down in the borders, and then that there's a grandfather born up on the outskirts of Glasgow, and we'll talk about that a bit more later on. But Girvan, as I say, on the coast. So what is it, about 40, 50 miles from Glasgow? You can see Ailsa Craig in the photo there. Um,
That's funnily enough, that's where our grandmother would have gone to when she was in her old age home. That's where she went.
all right, interesting.
Yeah, that's where she finalized her days.
Mhm. But an interesting area, and they did things connected with living there, and nice healthy place and so forth. But um, so sort of keeping an eye out on the clock. One of the things, as time goes on, the censuses were taken every 10 years, and they're such a key document. So the 1921 census was released fairly recently and has more information than before. So here they are. So Springburn, on the north side of Glasgow. Um, living. So this is William and Susan, with just the one child. So there's adopted daughter Susan. She's now age 18 by 1921, and there's someone boarding with them. And you can see where they're born. And there's William's born in Girvan. Susan was actually born across in Edinburgh. There's a bit of a story behind that. And there's daughter Susan, as you can see, Castle Douglas. But for the first time, you got the occupation in previous occupation censuses, but now it started to say the employment. So there's William Nixon. He's a grinder, but we know where he works. He's told the Hyde Park Loco Works. An intriguing thing about that is the Hyde Park Loco Works became the second biggest train works in the world. I mean, Glasgow was a phenomenal story in the Industrial Revolution. You possibly heard this expression, the second city of empire. In 1700, the growth of population between 1700 and 1900, it grew not by just 5 or 10 times. Glasgow grew by 50 times.
Wow.
Just was fantastic. That's a revolution. Shipbuilding, all sorts of other things, and so on. And jobs went with that. Here we are, train building. But it's intriguing that because it's a little bit more about our ancestors and what they actually did. And there's Susan, age 18. Quite often going back, the 13-year-old is working. People had to start work much sooner. So, and there's some people you'll know. So wait. There's one other thing. What have you got out of this? What would you like to walk in your ancestors' footsteps?
Oh, I don't know about that. I think the context I have, I'm comfortable with, so it's just too far removed for me, I think.
I mean, by that I mean sort of visiting the places where they were, like in Lanarkshire and so on.
Maybe one day. I know, was it for Granny's 90th birthday, Jill? I can't remember.
Wow.
Um, I think Auntie Brenda organized a tour on a bus and they went
Yeah,
around all the dresses that Granny had ever lived at and they had the
that's
kids
right.
and stopped the bus and got out and had a photo on the steps. And I didn't make that one, but such a fantastic idea. And I think in one of the old houses, as far as I remember the story, one of the present owner allowed them to come in and look around. Is that right, Joe? Were you
Oh,
there for
I
that?
I was there, but I don't remember that.
Yeah, I think
Um,
so.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. And it's intriguing that there's a change again, shoe shop manager, and they moved around quite a
Mm,
lot in various places.
they did.
Good. And so,
It's actually,
if I may, what do you think about the service from myself and Research Through People and what you've got out of that?
yeah, I think it's given us more information and a few more questions. I'm really
Hmm.
intrigued. I'd love to know more about Susan. And I know you've gone as far as you can with the adoption and we can't find any records. And I know that back then that was fairly normal, especially with the laundries and whatnot, that they could have really got that baby anywhere. But I think it's really interesting that when you look at the medical records, we know that she died of Huntington's disease, and we know that that's
Mm.
50% heritable. And we know that neither of her adoptive parents died of Huntington's disease. So therefore, that concludes that she was not their biological daughter.
Uh-huh.
But the fact that she ended up in a school for troubled children, I would love to know more about how that happened, why she was sent there. We know that later on she had problems, and we'd always known in the family that she'd been in and out of psychiatric care for different things. And I'd be very interested to know, was that to do with the Huntington's or was that to do with a mental health issue? We had assumed it was mental health, or there could be something else in the family, like we know now that there's neurodivergence in the family genetically. So perhaps it was linked to
Mm.
neurodivergence back then. I know a lot of neurodivergent people ended up in institutions. So
Uh-huh.
it just gives me so many more questions. I'd love to know what was going on for Susan in those days,
Mhm.
and how everything came to be, because it's just fascinating, but it's also a little sad because it sounds like from day one
Yeah,
she had a really tough time, like everything was against her. And
yeah.
I'm glad that whatever was against her, she managed to meet Albert, even if he didn't do what he was supposed to do. And they had our grandpa together, because obviously that gave us our whole family. So that's obviously
Mhm.
fantastic.
I second that, Mandy.
Yeah. No, good. Um, okay. Well, thanks to you for watching this. I hope you found that interesting. If you liked it, please subscribe to the Research Through People channel and YouTube. It really helps the panel to grow.